All right, so we're at a home shop today. Look at this thing. It's huge. But inside, like, look at this place. They've got everything here. But today we got Mike. Thank you so much for meeting up with me.
Listen,
man,
thanks.
I do appreciate it. I guess you must have owned your own shop at one point?
Yeah, we had a small speed shop at our last home
Okay.
that we run for 20 years, and then we sold it. We closed down the business and sold it, or sold the house, closed down the business, and moved here. We started moving tools in July of 2017.
You said it was a speed shop?
Speed shops. We worked on street rods, muscle cars, a lot of power sports, so snowmobiles, ATVs. We were heavy into sand duning, so we did a lot of sand drag ATVs where we stretched the noses out, built custom chromoly chassis, swing arms, high performance two-stroke engines, snowmobiles. We did everything from rolling chain cases, tapering tunnels, building horsepower with turbos and nitrous, and we did a lot of hill climbing with those. Street rods, I really enjoyed building the street rods. Built one for myself back in the 90s. It was featured in Street Rodder magazine in 95, and I built a couple more for some clients. We raced it a little bit, and then we've been heavily into Jeeps and muscle cars since then. So we don't do the power sports stuff anymore. When the side-by-sides became all the rage, it started shifting more towards the Jeeps and the muscle, back into the muscle cars again.
So this is your box here.
Yep, it's a KRL. When I realized I wanted to be a mechanic back in high school, I always dreamed this was like my pinnacle. It's what I wanted to own someday.
Yeah.
I bought this in 2006, I believe it was late 2006, and my Snap-on dealer at the time told me that was right before the Epics were being released.
Oh, okay.
And he said, you know, if you want to wait, there's some new ones coming out. And I'm like, nope, this is what I've always wanted. This is what I wanted, the KRL Master Series, and so I ended up buying the bottom, top, and locker all at the same time, and I've had it ever since. It's one of the few things I actually bought brand new, and I'm ashamed to say it, I do have a couple of little scratches in it, and I have nobody to blame but myself. Those were put in there by me, but it's starting to show a little wear now. But well, at first I was working 6 to 8 hours a night out of it. Nowadays I only work probably 3-4 hours a night.
Really?
So it doesn't see quite the use as it used to, but it still gets heavy use every day.
Gotcha. So you used to wrench full time and have your
I wrench full time, 8 hours a day, and then I'd go home to my speed shop, and where my son and I would wrench for 6 to 8 hours a night. Afterwards, I'd usually be home by 2:30 in the afternoon, and then we'd wrench till bedtime. Sometimes a little later. Yeah, so start side locker area. I have an Autel here. This is the 906. This is a fairly recent purchase.
Okay.
A couple years ago maybe is all. I bought it to complement my Snap-on Modus Ultra, and also it does some coding where the Modus Ultra doesn't, when you have to code modules to vehicles nowadays. So a lot of my tools are older, so I don't have a lot of new stuff to show. This got used a ton back in the day when I was doing.
Oh man!
You can see it leaned against a header or two, but the old digital torque wrench when we was setting up our cars, and I did a lot of carburetor work, a lot of distributor recurving back in the 80s and 90s. Snap-on coolant tester, air hammer, cylinder leakage tester, compression tester, vacuum gauge. There again, vacuum gauge. I don't think people give them quite their due justice anymore, but the vacuum gauge is an invaluable tool for kind of interpreting the health of an engine, how well it's pumping air through it. There's an old compression gauge that's been used heavily over the years. Imperial Eastman. This is a really nice flaring tool. Imperial Eastman, so it uses these dies for flaring fuel lines. Things like that. When it's building street rods and race cars and stuff, this got used very, very heavily. Yeah, and there's just the There's the cylinder linkage
Oh yeah.
tester that works really good for determining the health of your rings, your valve seats, valve sealing. But this is something that's kind of interesting and kind of unique that a lot of people may not be familiar with. This is a brake pressure testing tool. So what you do is you have an assortment of various sizes here. This threads into, like, say, where a bleeder screw threads in.
Okay.
And then it has a -3 JIC fitting on it, so you can hook up a gauge and you can actually test the pressure being applied at each of the 4 corners of your brake calipers. So I started having clients back in the 90s that we were building street rods, so you're trying to use a small booster and as minimal size brake master cylinder as you could for room constraints. And so some of them were having issues with stopping ability, so we wanted to make sure are we getting the most efficient use of this brake master cylinder? Are we getting the proper brake pressure at each of the 4 corners? Another one was on like Jeeps and trucks where we're putting larger tires on.
Oh,
so you've got a larger, more mass to try to stop, so we're putting larger brakes on them. So this is a great tool to help diagnose and make sure we're getting the proper pressure. Tap and die, got a couple tap and die sets and whatnot. Cool tools, these work really well for if you're
they're actually cool.
Making cool tools, exactly. Steel braided lines, and you're putting the ferrules on the end, and when you cut the lines, sometimes the stainless steel braids want to flare.
Yeah.
These you put on there and clamp them in a vise, and it holds everything nice and tight to where it'll allow you to put the fittings on without having to fight those strands of fiberglass, or not fiberglass, of stainless. And then just some powered corded tools. And moving over, nothing crazy up here. I do have my 3/4 inch snap-on. This is a nice torque wrench.
Oh geez.
So I just recently had to have it recalibrated. Dial on it was all fogged and everything, so I sent this in recently and got it back. I have a proto 3/4 inch also, but it's full length. It's one piece. I really like this one, and I've got my 1/2 inch tech angle, snap-on tech angle there. Let's see, just some miscellaneous paint pens, cross-check, things like that when we're building our suspension systems, and especially on their Jeeps, once we get everything torqued to spec, we'll go through and mark the fasteners with a paint pen. So when we're off-roading, you can kind of look and see if any of your lines are not lined up. You know that I got a fastener that's coming loose. So
that's smart.
Tape. This is a lot of the cloth tape that GM and I think Toyota uses heavily too. Basic piston ring compressors. I call these my sanity tools. On a lot of your older vehicles, they've had the little detent that pushes when you open the door. It turns the door light or your door chime on. So these fit in your door jams to keep the button depressed so you don't lose your mind while that buzzer's going off. Things like oil pump priming tools, cam tools, so it gives you some leverage. You bolt this on the front of your camshaft, it gives you some leverage when you go in, so you're not dragging the journals through the bearings. Same thing, connecting rods, this can snap on. You can use a piece of fuel, a lot of times they use a piece of fuel line as well, but this can kind of clamp on so your connecting rod doesn't bang around on your crankshaft journals as you're assembling them. Replacement stones for my Sun and cylinder hone, which is right here. This is used for honing cylinders.
Oh man.
So it's got a micrometer style, so you set it in the cylinder and then you can put pre-tension on it, and I've got different grit stones to get the cross hatches in the cylinders.
What is that?
For pulling lifters out of V8s.
Look
so
at
you
that.
Stick it down in. Sometimes they're hard to pull out of the lifter bore. So when you get the manifold off and your push rods and everything out of the way, you can stick this down in.
Look at that,
grab the inner lip of the lifter and pull them right out.
That's cool.
Let's see. Then there's basically, these are slick. These work for doing automatic transmissions. A lot of times you end up using a seal tool. These are the old lip seal tools that people used to use, well, myself included, all the time for when you're trying to put the lip seals down in your clutch baskets on an automatic transmission. You use a piece of this wire and you run around it so the lip seals fold in. These are These take the place of this anytime, any day of the week.
Really?
Yeah. You put it down in, you kind of put your piston down in with the lip seal and just run this around your clutch basket. Boop, they pop right in. So the torsion bar for GMs, these are kind of unique. I did a lot of hydraulic cylinder repair as an industrial maintenance mechanic. So we always had hydraulic cylinders. You pull the packing glands out, and when you go to put the new ones back in, they're sometimes hard to compress. So you take a tool like this and you put it in there, and then you fold it, and basically it'll fold the packing in on itself, put it down in the cylinder, then you expand it back out and pull the tool out, and the packing pops right into the groove in the hydraulic cylinder.
That's genius.
So yeah, transmission pressure gauge for diagnosing transmissions. I got a couple of those. I got this one here is a generic one, and I've got a Matco one underneath it. Rimac spring tester. I've got a Rimac tester for testing valve springs for cylinder heads. You always want to have one that's calibrated, and you use that to calibrate your tester. Rimac valve spring tester. This is used for setting up valve springs on engines. You have a calibration spring that you insert, and then you run it down to a certain installed height, and you calibrate to make sure your pressure's accurate. Then when you put your valve springs in, you have an installed height and a fully open height. So you go ahead and set your spring, check what your valve seats are supposed to be at seat pressure, so you can set them all up uniformly. Then depending on what ratio your rocker arms are, you can calculate that out and know what the spring will compress to at fully open, depending on what cam lift you have.
Right.
So you can go ahead and run it down, check it at whatever your fully open height is, check your pressures, and make sure everything's consistent. When you start running into inconsistencies in your installed heights, you'll use small shims under your valve springs to shim them to make sure that you get consistent valve spring pressures. Some small mini hones for back in the day when we used to rebuild wheel cylinders.
Oh gosh,
drum brakes.
That's a long
that
time.
goes back a day or two.
Not just drums, but like rehoning drums.
Yeah, rehoning those wheel cylinders. Wow. So this is my drilling drawer. So I've got all my number, letter, and fractional drill bits, plus my larger ones and everything. A few step drills. Let's see. This is unfortunately my junk drawer. I have some batteries. Every mechanic's got at least one of these, right? Another one here. This has got some gaskets like for my LS and my Jeep. Got spare exhaust gaskets there. Harley, same thing. Just some spare miscellaneous small bits and pieces. This one here is Master Cool, is another flaring tool. I bought this one probably 15 years or so ago after the East Imperial Eastman. This one works really good, but it's hydraulic. You have a small handheld hydraulic pump. You put the die in, you put the spindle in, put your line in, clamp it down, and then you tighten the valve, and you pump it up and use this hydraulic pressure to flare your lines.
Oh, man.
These work great on a lot of the GM, Toyota, even Dodge, like the fuel lines and so forth that always rust through.
Oh, sure,
You can buy just blank lengths of line and then make them fit. Really old Snap-on. This was a coworker of mine. He broke his and he gave me the weight off of it.
Oh, okay.
Probably 25 years ago, and I've just had this bouncing around in my toolbox for the last 25 years. But about 5 years ago, I actually made a new handle
Look at that.
for it. So I machined it on the lathe. And now that's my smaller slide hammer, and it's all the I've got all the regular attachments for pulling like wheel bearings, various attachments I've made for it to fit other tools. Smaller ones like this one here is for pilot bearings.
Oh, that's awesome.
Put it in as you put it into a pilot bushing or a pilot bearing, and then as you tighten it down, it spreads out and locks in and allows you to extract.
Oh, that's so cool.
Allows you to extract it. One for small seals. It just takes a little sheet metal screw that you can replace. You put it in there, and there again, it's just small. Same thing here. This is another little seal tool. You can set where you would set it. This one here is more for leverage. You set that where you want it. This will fit down in behind the lip seal, and then you use leverage to pull a seal out. Use this a lot on two-stroke motorcycle engines and ATV engines and stuff like that. Bushing driver sets. These in the industrial maintenance world, these got used a lot for changing out bushings and small riser shafts and various linkages and so forth. This is for gun tension spring for triggers, but I also used this a lot when we were setting up snowmobile clutches. You'd hook this onto your secondary clutch and you could pull it, and you I kept copious notes of when I was setting up clutches on what this spring would allow this much pre-tension, and so I could set up clutches for whether you wanted it to launch harder or shift more aggressively, because they were all variable ratio transmissions, like snowmobiles. So
that's so cool.
This one is my torque drawer, and obviously I have two that are missing. Hey. My son's got those over at the bench working. I've got a snap-on 3/8 split beam and then a snap-on 1/2 inch micrometer style.
Jeez, I'm done with it. Okay.
Yeah, so there's the split beam 3/8. Okay. And then I've got a Tech wrench, an older Tech wrench that I still use quite a bit. One of the first ones, and then about, I don't know, 6 or 8 years ago, I bought the 1/2 inch Tech angle and the 3/8 Tech angle. Okay. And they're great. They're great torque wrenches. For some reason, I just don't use it as much. Oh, really? I always pull my batteries out. Also, I don't like leaving my batteries in. But I don't use this one quite as much as I do the Tech wrench. But that does have the angle feature on that one. These are a couple of another Central, and these made by CTI. 3/8 and 1/2. I kept those in my race trailer when we were racing, so I didn't have to transfer tools in and out. Okay. Proto dial torque wrench. This gets used a lot. I do a lot of rear ends, so this gets used a lot for setting up the pinion bearing preload. So once you tighten up the pinion bearing, you want to have, like, say, new bearings. A lot of them will be in the 15 to 25 inch-pound of rotating torque. You need to be able to have a dial. Or you can use the beam style, but the dial works really good to be able to set it up. And you don't want to focus so much on breakaway torque, but once you break it away and it settles down, you want to be able to move it in an arc and watch and make sure you have the proper bearing preload. A couple of smaller ones. I've got a Matco. I think this goes up to 50. Yeah, 50 inch-pounds. Cute little thing. I use this lot quite heavily on rocker covers, small block, big block. Chevy rocker covers. Use that quite a bit on it. This is probably one you don't see too often. This is a torque screwdriver. Snap-on. So
I've never seen that before.
Yeah, it's micrometer style. She set it up. When I was doing a lot of carburetors back in the 80s and 90s, Holley in particular had torque specs for their float bowls when they go onto their center section. I think it was like 7 or 9 inch-pounds. Wow. So that got used quite a bit on that. Then this one's got sentimental value. This is an old Mac one. My mentor, who recently passed away here, gave me this probably 30 years ago when I started working for him, and that one's got sentimental value. I still use that one quite a bit today. Then we come down into my electronics drawer. So I got a power probe. I believe this is the version 3. I also have the extension. This works really good. I don't use it a ton, but it works nice for setting up. If I'm wiring a trailer connector or something for somebody, you can hook up to the battery and you go back and you can test all your circuits before you actually plug into the vehicle and make sure that everything's working properly. Thomas & Betts zip tie gun. You can set the tension on it, so you put this tie wrap in, pull it, and it cuts it off flush at a certain tension, so you can set the tension. I use that a lot when I was setting up wire looms for race cars and street rods and stuff like that. You wanted to have the wires all run just right, but you know as well as I do, if you tighten one too tight, it kind of puts a bulge in it. So you'd find a tension that works for, say, 6 wires. You'd set it a certain one and go through it. It's going to keep all the tension the same on them. These work really good on connector removals tools, where you have the little lever that lifts up, and then you undo your connectors, electrical connectors. Sometimes if you lift up a little too far, they break. Not far enough, you can't get them undone. These tools work really good for going under, and it pulls it up a predetermined amount, and then also gives you the aid of being able to pull on it or push on it. A vacuum pump. This is what I use quite a bit for when I was setting up distributors for Vacuum Advance. You hook this up and check Vacuum Advance. Also, some of the Fords And I believe even some of the GMs used vacuum EGR valves. So you could set it up, you could pump it up, activate it, make sure it was working, functioning properly.
Yeah.
A couple of small tachometers for setting up small engines. This one's a digital one for Oregon. You aim it at the spark plug, and it'll tell you what the RPM for your small engines, line trimmers, lawnmowers, things like that. This one is an old mechanical style that's technology. Not much technology in this one, but it works. So if this will work on anything that reciprocates. So I used to use this on electric motors at work.
Really?
If you're just making sure your RPMs were set up right and everything, you could put this on anything that rotates an engine, and as you turn it, this spring goes out, and when it starts moving at its narrowest, it would start going out wide, and then when it gets to its narrowest point, you read on the scale, and it'll tell you what RPM that piece of equipment is turning at. And it works on engines, internal combustion engines. I've used it on electric motors. It actually works really well. Fluke, amp clamp, use that a lot for checking current draw, especially on some of these RVs. Fluke 87, this has been my go-to meter for 35 years.
35 years?
I started in 88 as an industrial maintenance mechanic, and that was my go-to meter for all these years, and I loved it. I still do.
Man, I think they still sell that.
Yes, they do.
The same model.
Yeah,
awesome.
some of my newer coworkers have just bought this one because I brag it up. It's been my favorite meter because it'll do. It's a Cat 5, I believe it is. It'll do also up to 600 volts.
Man.
Whereas in the industrial field we deal a lot with 483 phase.
Okay.
So it'll easily test all that. But I just recently bought the Snap-on one. This is the advanced one. It's not the one that has the Bluetooth link. I don't necessarily need all that, but this one's nice, and I actually do like this. The display's nice, and it's a nice display, so if you're working either, whether it's in the shop here or right out of the shop apron outside, you can easily read it. It's big enough. As I get a little bit older, afraid to say my eyesight's kind of not what it was, but it's a good meter. My only complaint is Snap-on's leads.
Oh, really?
All these years, so I took my Fluke leads and put them on my Snap-on meter. The Fluke leads are nice and soft, pliable. The Snap-on ones feel like you've got a piece of welding rod that you're trying to, I'm not impressed with Snap-on's leads. I don't understand it. So, capacitor tester, there again from the industrial world, you check run capacitors, start capacitors. You can check how many microfarads the capacitor is holding. This is something that we worked on a lot of Harleys. I got a Deutsch connector here, and that is invaluable. Harleys, you got to use the right connector. You got to run the right. I've seen guys use the Deutsch connectors and then use like a standard crimping tool, and they'll work, but I just don't trust them for very long. Whereas this is the actual Deutsch connector tool. Oh, okay. So you set the depth you want the tool, you want the wire, the insert to go into, and then this one here, it crimps on all. There's 4 dies that come in, so it crimps it all the way around. And as much as those Harleys shake, rattle, and vibrate, you want to make sure you use the proper crimping tool for them. An really old Snap-on.
Seen some use there.
Yeah, seen some use. So let's see, just another junk drawer. Oh, so chopsticks. I don't know how many mechanics have chopsticks in their toolbox, but if not, you should. Whenever you go to a Chinese restaurant, ask for chopsticks, even if you can't eat with them. Okay. They work great. They're great tools for if you're working on have to mix up 2-part epoxies. Oh, okay. Yeah. And you have a little plastic panel that you broke a little plastic tab off of, which never happens. You grab a set of chopsticks, mix up your little epoxy, and then you flip it around on the other end, and it's big enough you can actually use it to apply it. So, and then they just go right in the garbage after. So, I keep a small supply of chopsticks. Miscellaneous tools. This is an old strobe timing light that we used on all of our snowmobiles, and so it has a timing light there. The back end clips around your spark plug wire. And then your strobe will actually go down on your flywheel or your magneto, so you can time your engines. That works really good. Back in the old days, when motorcycles had points, you had to set them up for their opening, And a meter, a regular volt ohm meter is not really, is actually too sensitive. So you use what they have called a buzz box. So you'd set this up to your leads on your points. You'd roll your flywheel over to where your sound just breaks. And that's where you know you have your points opening. This is a shop-made tool that I built for when you're turning these big, large Class 8 diesel engines over to run the overheads on them. You have to start. You have to, like most of your inline sixes, you'll start at top dead center on number 1, adjust 1, 2, 2 intake, 4, so forth, go through sequence. Then you have to roll the engine over. Some of them, they have a barring tool, which you would use to bar the engine over, where you pull the starter motor and this goes in and you bar the engine over. But on some of them, they're hard to access that. And so I built this tool that actually comes in from the front, grabs the inside of the radius of the harmonic balancer. And then this is adjustable so it tightens and moves down and grabs a hold of the outside. And then I just have a socket I put on it so I can put a large breaker bar or my long 1/2-inch ratchet on it. So I can grab this from the outside, clamp it on the harmonic balancer, and turn it over without having to pull starter motor, without having to go through all that other stuff.
That is genius.
And this is just something I machined up and welded together, and it works really well actually. More tools here. This is for setting. This is for doing like steering neck bearings on motorcycles. You have various different adapters. You stick this up through your steering neck on your frame, lock it into place, and then as you tighten it down, it presses your bearings into your steering neck. If you notice, I've got a lot of tools around my shop for pressing. I don't like beating on bearings. That's never been something I've been fond of, is hammering or beating on bearings or races or anything. So I like to drive things with pressure, whether it be a hydraulic press or in this case, this works really good for, like say, pressing steering bearings in. Another homemade tool for flywheels for small engines. You bolt it on and then just pull it on and presses the flywheel, presses the flywheels off. Setting piston, when I'm setting piston ring clearances, set this down in, put your ring down in, push it down in the predetermined amount, measure for your end gap, then you file your ring gaps, make sure they're right. But yeah, this here you make sure you at least got them square in the bore.
I see. So that'd be better than like a piston.
Yeah, I mean, you can use piston and everything. It's just with a piston, it's kind of subjective because you can put it in, you can always rock your piston just a little bit. And if your ring is kind of off a little bit, whereas this has got the land, so you just put your ring down in and push it down in to where it's the same distance, and you know it's perfectly perpendicular and square in that bore. Let's see, motorcycle piston, brake caliper piston, compressing tool. This is for Mendiola, and I did a lot of sand rails and so forth. We did a lot of ring and pinions, and where we flopped them from standard to mid-engine sand rails. So you had to flip the ring and pinions. So you're driving on the right side of the ring gear. So a lot of times I end up using Weddell bush or bearings, Weddell gears, and they had a chrome moly nut that took a special socket to be able to torque them. Same thing, a couple seal drivers for like the Mazda 13B. Our personal sand rail I built a lot of Volkswagen sand rail motors, but our personal one was a 13B rotary. So you had that one there is to check. So you'd bolt this down over your thermostat housing there, and you could put a little bit of air pressure in it and check, make sure you had a tight where your rotors are going around, make sure you don't have any leaks before you put the engine actually in the car.
That's so cool.
So you can check that kind of things with it. These are all the seal drivers for them. Some more meat measuring stuff, snap gauges, telescoping gauges, whatever you want to call them. Calipers for measuring your brake rotors. Up to 6-inch micrometers with all the anvils for all your calibration anvils.
So it seems like a lot of your like micrometers and stuff are like analog. You don't like the digital?
I don't have a lot of digital stuff. There again, I kind of go back to I don't like things that take batteries. Last chance indicator.
What do you use that for?
This in here is set up for a lot of setup work for. Let's say if you're trying to set something up in the mill and you want to make sure that it's parallel with either the X or the Y axis, or you're checking to make sure your bore, you can check the inside of a bore with this attachment you can come in and put it in there and check the inside of a bore and make sure that you're centered. The quill is centered over it. So it's just a they call it the last word. It's kind of an industry standard in a lot of machinists.
Okay.
And I'm going to preface right there by saying I'm not a machinist. I'm a mechanic who taught himself how to machine. I'm a mechanic who taught himself how to weld, fabricate, machine. I'm not a machinist, and I'm not I was a certified welder at one time, but I'm a mechanic that just learned how to do the other stuff.
That's awesome.
Coming down to ratchet drawer. There again, I'm not a big fan of the comfort grips. I know I'm probably an oddity there. Most people like their comfort grips. I have a couple. I tried a couple. Of the ones that I do have, this one and my 1/4" one are probably my two favorites.
Okay.
This one, it works really good on the Duramaxes for reaching those back socket head cap screws between the booster and the firewall on the valve covers.
Okay.
This works great because you can get it back in there enough, and with a short Allen on it, when you push down, it's not like one of these style when you're trying to push down, it wants to flex.
Okay.
You're pushing down, it's actually pushing through the middle of the center of it, and it pushes down and gives you the best chance to not strip out a socket head cap screw. How's that? I'm old school, I guess. I like my just regular old chrome Snap-on. Now I did upgrade pretty much everything, I don't know, over the last 6, 8, 10 years to the dual 80s.
Oh, okay.
Before that I had the old, 36, I believe it was.
Something like that, yeah.
The ones that, clunk, 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 because you're going around a fastener. Yeah, my son's got all my old tools from when I was working in the industrial field, so he has all those now. But yeah, I've recently switched over to the dual 80s. So I think this is a Blue Point one. Easy Red was the one that originated this ratchet, and then they sold the rights to, the patent. I think the patent ran out.
Oh, okay.
And then other companies. I believe Snap-on actually makes this now. This is a Blue Point one. I've had this for probably 20 years. Huh. But this works really good. On the Duramaxes as well, if you reach in the left fender, where the tube coming off the back of the water pump goes back to the cooler, the oil cooler there, you've got O-rings, you've got a gasket at the water pump, and you've got O-ring where it goes into the oil cooler. And it's kind of problematic to get on the back side of that. There's a stud with a nut.
Oh, okay.
And so you can put a 10 millimeter on it, you can put it up there and you lock it, which allows you to break it loose. Then you go to the free travel and you can just push and pull, and you can zip that nut off, at least enough to where you can reach your finger around and do the last 2 or 3 threads with your finger.
So it looks like you have a lot of Snap-on tools. Are you partial to Snap-on, or do you just kind of whatever
Earlier years, like late 80s all the way to probably 2000, or even into early 2000s, I had a so-so Snap-on guy, a really good Mac guy, really good Matco guy, and a really good Cornwell guy. And so I kind of spread the love.
Okay.
I bought from all of them. The last probably 15 years, I've had an amazing Snap-on guy.
Oh, really?
And so I don't buy a lot of tools these days, but when I do, that's my go-to.
Okay.
He's here. I don't know if I mention his name.
Yeah.
His name's Ken Gibbs.
He's
for Davis County here. Yeah. He's done a really good job of taking care of me. If I have a tool that is damaged or worn to the point where it's not functioning properly, even if I didn't buy it from him, and even if I've had it for 30 years, he's been taking care of me on.
That's so cool.
So just because of that, when I need a tool, that's my go-to.
That's cool.
So
like no hassle.
I want to be able to support him when I can, because he supports me where he can. This ratchet right here is kind of an oddity. It's a Snap-on Flex, but they make this in a 3/8 drive.
Okay.
However, when they do, they use the 1/4 inch. They use the 1/4 inch that has the recessed plate, and then the threads are up here in the housing, and it's not as strong as the ones that have the recess going through with full thread depth into the plate.
Okay.
So I've seen guys on the internet take and buy the kit to change this over from a 1/4 to a 3/8. But when they do that, it's still using, I don't want to say inferior, but in my mind it's weaker, so therefore it is inferior, this style, to where it doesn't hold the torque.
I see. Okay.
So if you're having a longer handle, you really want to be able to put the torque on it without worrying about stripping the threads out of the head of the ratchet. So what I did is I took and machined. I made a small adapter here. Oh, that's not it. I made a small adapter that bolts that plate down. I can't find it right now. But it bolts that plate down and allows me to come in and mill the pocket of the 3/8 ratchet to accept the full 3/8 arbor. So in my opinion, this is kind of the correct way to do this. Over on Garage Journal, where I'm on the forum over there, there's a gentleman that he used to be a Snap-on dealer, and he did this conversion, but he wanted to do this conversion, but he didn't have any way of machining. So he reached out to me. He's local here too, down Salt Lake. So he reached out to me. He come by. I had never done it before. I machined the plate to match what he needed, and it worked out so good that I did one for myself. Now this ratchet doesn't get used a ton, but when you need that 3/8 drive, which will allow, I think they'll say this will handle up to 55 or 65 foot-pounds of torque, whereas the regular one will only do like 30, I think it's 35. This works really good on like the Subaru engines, the little pancake engines where the spark plugs are right down along the frame rail. And you cannot get a full-size ratchet into that that area. But yeah, like I said, I'm probably more partial to the Snap-on. Next drawer down is going to be Snap-on nut drivers. I got some old Blue Point amber handled screwdrivers.
I've never seen that before. That's cool.
Yeah, these are back in. I had these in my race trader for many years. These are probably date back to the late 80s, early 90s maybe. Blue Point was making them, and they're actually a good screwdriver. They got a good feeling handle to them too.
Awesome.
I've got a few wobbly extensions. I know a lot of people really like these. They have their place. They're not my go-to by any means, but I do have them to where if I need, I've got them in 3/8 and half. They're not my favorite, but I do have them to where if I need them, I know right where to go to grab them. This is a Napa. Now this is Napa back when it was made by Danaher, all made in the USA. This isn't the new Napa stuff made by Carlisle. It's still good stuff. It's Taiwanese. But the old Napa stuff that I have, most of the old Napa stuff I have was made by Danaher from the 80s, 90s. I believe even into the early mid 2000s. They built all their tools. Inductive ammeter. You can set this up for measuring current. And the other thing it works good on is if you have a short, you can run this tool here. You put a circuit breaker in line, and then you can run this down along your wiring loom. And where you start seeing the circuit breaker where it's tripping, you'll see the inductance needle, and all of a sudden you get past where your short's at. This will quit moving.
No way.
So you know, okay, somewhere in this loom in this area is where my short is at. There again, more. Let's see. This was used heavily back on small engines for setting up needle and seats on small engine carburetors. Briggs & Stratton becomes the Zenith carburetors, so forth, and then all the little tools. I went to I think it was a Briggs & Stratton training class, and back in the early 80s maybe, I was still in high school, and bought this set, and it comes with like the little sets to remove the needle, like the seats, and then to reinstall the new seats into the fuel inlets. This one here is used. You can get down in and you can kind of hook it, and the little slide hammer to extract the seats out of it. Pump for checking, like I said, put it in, check your needle and seats, make sure it holds pressure, so you're not going to flood the engine. Some basic gasket scrapers, the SK ones. The SK ones actually work pretty good, but I tell you, these are a couple of my older sets, the Blue Point and the Snap-on ones. These work really. Still need tools again. That's all right. That's all right. I know where you live. These are a couple of my older sets. And then recently I bought these Matco ones. I think Lyle also has a similar handle on them. But I recently bought the Snap-on, the carbide scrapers. I love these carbide scrapers, especially on like timing covers on aluminum castings and so forth, where they put the serrations in to where it has to hold a certain amount of adhesive.
Oh, sure.
So you don't want to use anything mechanical like an abrasive or anything, because you can remove those little serrations and therefore not hold the sealant properly. These here you can run along and you scrape that, and then with maybe like a Scotch-Brite pad, come along and clean them. But you drag these along. It does a really good job of cleaning the material without gouging and actually creating more work for yourself in the aluminum. This is fairly recent. I bought some of these. I believe these are Carlisle, but they're the same ones. I think Mountain, Easy Red. I think they all come out of the same Taiwanese factory.
Okay.
But these are the long spline drive, flex, reversible.
Oh yeah,
ratchets.
I think even Matco has like a.
Yeah, Matco has them. I know Cornwell has them. Snap-on does too, but obviously Snap-on ones are not only quite a bit spendier, but I wasn't sure how I'd like the spline drive. I actually don't mind them.
Yeah.
It wouldn't have been my first choice, but they actually work pretty decent. So I've got them in SAE and metric, as well as I've got some Capri thin. We used to call these, back in the day, we used to call these tappet wrenches.
Oh, okay.
For adjusting flat tappets and everything on your engines. But there's thin wrenches. I've got them in metric and SAE as well. This has come in handy. It's a extension. Now, the way these work is it's got a gear in here with a chain and a housing, so you can put an impact on it. And these work really good, like on these large RVs, these diesel pusher motorhomes, changing out the air springs, where you don't have a lot of room on top of the air spring bracket between the body or the axle to get an impact on. You can put your socket on, reach up in there, and then put your impact gun out here and hit it and zip your fastener off.
That'd be nice.
Snap-on snap ring pliers, so they've got them in the straight 45 and 90s.
Okay.
And these are the internal, external
Oh yeah.
adjustment ones. I've had those quite a while. I really like those. A few transmission ones for your steels and so forth in your automatic and manual transmissions. Some miscellaneous bits. This is my extraction, mainly my extraction drawer. So I've got everything from broken fastener extractors. This is quite an old set as well, Snap-on, to, I believe this is my little impact driver.
Oh yeah.
Impact driver with bits. Ratcheting screwdriver. If I go out on calls, road calls, or go help somebody, a lot of times rather than grab a bunch of screwdrivers, I'll just throw that in. This is an Easy Red adapter bit set. This works really good on CP3 pumps on the Duramaxes. When you're on the back side where you have the pressure release sensor, you really have to be able to get in there tight. And I've got this style here that worked really well, these little bit drivers that I like. But sometimes there's other things, and to minimize having to take the whole top of the everything from your Y and everything down in your intake, something with a little bit of an angle to get down in there. And then there's some external extractors for stud removers. I don't use these too much now, but back when I was building a lot of two-stroke engines, pulling studs in and out of cases.
Oh, okay.
Miscellaneous strap wrenches, exhaust. Those used for getting the exhaust isolators, the rubber isolators off. Duramax testing. This clips onto the test port on the front of the Duramax engines, and you can check and make sure check your vacuum and your pressure on your system.
You must do a lot of Duramax work.
He's got an 02, I've got an 06.
Okay.
So our own stuff, and then we've done injectors, we've done pumps, we've done the head, we've done work on other ones as well.
Oh, wow.
But we do a fair amount of Duramax work. So, for checking when you Duramax have like what they call an extended crank symptom at times.
Okay.
So this is a gas cap I converted where I drilled and machined and tapped and then epoxied a bung in to where I can put this in the cap, block off the vent, and I can inject a small amount of air in it. Okay. Because the Duramaxes don't have a lift pump like your Cummins or your Fords.
Okay.
So they rely on the CP3 pump pulling fuel from the tank.
Oh, okay.
And if you have a leak, whether it be a rusted line, whether it be a rubber fitting or something, you're going to pull air and you'll never know it.
Oh, okay.
So by this way, you can pressurize the tank and try to force some to it, and then go underneath with a bottle of soapy water and start looking for bubbles and see if you have any leaks anywhere. So that's basically just to aid us in diagnosing an extended crank. I mentioned I do a lot of rear ends. I have a OTC case spreader, and in my opinion, when you're doing rear ends, you really need to spread those cases to get the carriers in and out to properly set up your preload. And so I've got an OTC case spreader that I bought 30 years ago when I started doing rear ends. But I've since made multiple adapters that adapt to like the Ford 8.8, the Dana 44s and the Jeeps. I think I can use the case spreader right directly on them. The Ford 8.8, I have to use an adapter. GM 12 bolt and 10 bolts, I have to use adapters. So basically, these bolt onto the side, like where your differential cover goes, and it goes into a casting hole and allows the OTC fixture to grab and pull. Because this fixture is either too wide or doesn't quite fit the configuration. You only have a narrow window of adjustment on this case spreader to open it, so you have to make it up with the plates. I've machined several of these, and then I usually treat them with like a black oxide, like a liquid bluing to kind of give it preserve the metal. This is something I don't use too much these days, but it's for checking power valves on Holley carburetors. So you'd put your power valve, you'd thread your power valve in there. This has got an O-ring in there, sealed, so you put it down. Then you put the vacuum tester that I showed earlier on it, and you'd pull on it and check and see where the diaphragm breaks its pressure at. So if you're setting up a power valves have got to be set up to where when you're accelerating, when the engine gets to a certain vacuum point, it opens that power valve and lets a little more fuel for fuel enrichment.
I see.
And a lot of times you could get pretty close by setting it up with a vacuum gauge at idle with the transmission in gear, so you're loading the engine a little bit. What's your vacuum reading? So say it's 15 inches of vacuum, you divide that in half, so say 7.5, so you'd end up with a 75 or an 80 power valve. And that's kind of how I figured out how to kind of size them, and then I would verify that with these little tools. There's one there, and then this one here is used for taking the power valve in and out so you don't damage them. Back in the day, I did a lot the same thing. There's another Holley. This one here is for either the 4150 or 4160 Holley carburetors, whether it be a center hung or a side hung float bowl. That has your jam nut, and then that's your flat. So you could set this down, break the jam nut loose, and you could raise or lower your valve in there to set your float level. I mean, you can do the same thing with a wrench and a screwdriver, but sometimes you got a bleed hole screw out here. You're trying to watch for it. You're over here. You got two hands. Sometimes it's easier to just put this down, crack it loose, hold it, and then you can increase or decrease while you're watching it, and it just kind of simplifies things a little bit. Boost for checking CAC tubes on your diesels, whether it be Duramax, Power Stroke, or even the Cummins. You can put these into the silicone boots on your charge air cooler, on your hot pipes or your cool pipes. So it's got a couple different size adapters, and then the hose, the quick connect on there. So you can hook your compressed air up to it, shop air, and check for leaks. And you're going to bleed off because it's going to go through and bleed through the turbo. So you are going to have some, but you want to add 10, they'll usually hold 10 pounds. And you start getting up around 20, 25 pounds, which is mostly what your vehicles are producing at boost anyway. You will start bleeding off, but you want to see. I've had some of them with such a bad leak that it won't even build. 10 pounds is usually okay. You start getting 20, if the needle starts falling off quick, you say, okay, we've got a leak in here somewhere. And maybe it's a band clamp, maybe it's a little nick in one of the silicone elbows or something. But that goes really. Anytime I do any turbo work on these modern diesels, I check them before I pull it apart to make sure there's any problems, just verify there's no problems. And then I also check them again right before I'm connecting, make that last connection, so I make sure that nothing I did created a leak somewhere. Because as like I said, some of these Power Strokes and Duramaxes and stuff are getting several 100,000 miles on them. Those hoses and the fittings and stuff are getting a little brittle, and anytime you move one, you can create a possible leak. Valve spring, LS valve spring compressors. I've got a Trick Tools one in here, and I've got a Comp Cam. So this works really good for when you pull your common rail off for your rocker arms. You can go in and you can push this, and it'll adjust down on your springs, and you can compress and change out springs. Some miscellaneous brake tools down here. Drum tools that I don't use very often now. So you got your hook tools, you got your spring adjusters, tools. don't do a lot of drum brakes these days. For measuring drum brakes, you set this up, measure the inside of your drum brake, then you take it over to the vehicle and set your brake shoes to the right depth or the right distance, and that gets you really, really close.
Okay.
So you don't have to sit there and ratchet it all the way out with this afterwards. Donuts in here, various size caps for my smoke machine.
Okay.
The big drawer, socket drawer. So this is got a lot of history in it, but basically anything from my 3/8 extensions here, anything left is SAE, right's metric.
Okay.
A couple of my very earlier sets. This is a Cornwell set of deeps, 1/2 inch. Yeah, I'd probably say this and my Mac deep 1/2 inch. Bought these in the late 80s when I started wrenching professionally.
Oh man.
1/2 inch SAE, 1/2 inch metric Max. And then the other two I bought real close to the same time was the semi-deep Cornwells.
Okay.
And they're not even black anymore. These are probably my favorite semi-deeps. And I kept telling myself when I ever had problems with these, I was going to go to the Snap-ons, but these are 35 plus years old.
Wow.
And I've never, every once in a while I'll have to go over and touch them up a little bit on the the belt sander to get rid of the little burrs.
Oh, sure, yeah.
But these have held, yeah, you see that one there,
awesome.
it's been done not too long ago. But they've held up really well. Nice. So those are some of my oldest ones. And then I get into my Snap-on Chrome, standard and deep, Matco crow's feet, 1/4 inch, I believe these are Proto. Yeah, those are Proto and these are Matco, the shallow 1/2 inch. The 1/4 inch wobblies are fairly recent. I just bought these bought the metric and the SE set year ago maybe.
Okay.
So not too long ago. I'm starting to use 1/4 inch now more and more, mainly because a lot of the plastic stuff under the hood of the cars and stuff.
Oh, gotcha.
I'm using 1/4 inch stuff more on them, and I even bought a 1/4 inch impact.
Oh, did you?
Driver. I just thought I'd give it a try, and so far I kind of like it.
Cool.
So Wobblies, Snap-on. These are probably 30 years old.
Really?
And I recently had 2 of them. Like I said, Ken is awesome. He just warranted these couple for me. The 1/2 inch, the metric ones haven't gotten used quite as much. These are probably 20 years old.
Okay.
But they haven't gotten used quite nearly as much as my SAE set. These might not be too familiar to a lot of people. These are called a weatherhead socket. Brass fittings, JIC fittings, things like that. These fit over the end and allow you to take them. And a lot of times, space is you can't get a wrench into some of these places.
Oh, gotcha.
So
yeah.
I've had these ones probably, I'll bet you 30 plus years of these, because in the industrial world, a lot of brass fittings, a lot of pipe fittings, a lot of JIC fittings. So these got used a lot. My set that goes up to 2 inch is Napa. At the end, there again though, it's the old Danaher.
Oh, okay.
So this is when Danaher was making all the Napa stuff. So Snap-on 1/4 inch semi-deeps, the Danaher 3/8 and SAE and metric are all the Wobblies are all Danaher. So there's a O2 sensor socket. Now this one I actually had to chuck up in the lathe and machine it down. I believe on the high feature engine, on the GM engines, they put a heat shield on that #1 bank back by the firewall, and it just prevents the socket from, it's so close in diameter to the O2 sensor.
Oh, really?
You can't get a socket all the way down on it. And the first one I tried, it rounded off the top of the socket, the flats a little bit. So I machined it down to where it fits down inside of the heat shield and be able to get a full depth cut or engagement on the O2 sensor. So I had to machine that one a little bit. Duramax turbo vane sensor. They put it in a place where you can get a wrench back there, and if it happens to line up with where the flats are, you're okay.
Okay.
Anything more than that, you're kind of trying to move things around. So I took a socket and chucked it up in the mill and milled a groove in it to allow for the wire to go through. So I can slip this down over and so you can change a turbo vane sensor or a pressure sensor out in no time now with that. It's probably a tool you don't see too often. This is for Caterpillar. The large engines, the 3406, 3208, 3126 for injector fittings. You put it down, don't reach down over it. Torx bits, inverted Torx.
What are these back there?
Okay, so these ones here.
Yeah.
These are when you're timing an engine. I've got a large 14-inch degree wheel.
Okay.
So like say for a Ford or say a big block Chevy or small block Chevy, you put your degree wheel on, then you thread this on and it locks it down into place, sandwiches it on. Now you've got the keyway from the crankshaft where the harmonic balancer goes on, so you can take this on and off repeatedly without disrupting the location, the orientation of your degree wheel. Easy red, adjustable or extendable ratchet. I've only had that maybe 6 or 8 years. Works pretty good.
Have you put much force on those?
Yeah, I actually have put quite a bit on to where, like the crush sleeves on the Dana 44s and the rear of the Jeeps.
Okay.
I'll have my grunt tool hooked to the yoke and I'll lock it against the suspension. And then I'll grab that, and that initial trying to get that crush sleeve to crush is probably it's got to be upwards of 400 plus foot-pounds.
Oh, wow.
And get it cracked loose, and then once it starts compressing, you're usually okay.
Do you use the speed wrenches much?
I do.
Yeah.
Not so much the 1/4-inch one these days. That's an old one. That's probably pushing 40 years. That was one of the first tools I bought. But I do use the 3/8 one routinely because when I'm starting my son just used it today. I'll use an adapter, like say putting the wheels on. I don't like starting them with power tools, so I'll put those on, start them, spin them on, snug them up, and then set them down to where they just touch. Then torque the wheels on. But yeah, I use my speeders a lot. There's a specialty socket I had to build years ago on the Harleys to reach on the inside of the counter shaft by the compensator. It needed to be extra long to allow for the socket or to allow for the shaft. Harley wanted like $175 for the socket, so I just bought up here at Smith & Edwards. They used to sell sockets by the pound.
Oh, okay.
And they were questionable quality, but I just bought the one I needed, and then I cut it and welded on the sockets that I to get to a 1/2 inch, and I use that, and I've used that for years. It's worked great. Wrenches. Okay, wrench drawer. Yeah, wrench drawer. There again, I like Snap-on. The standard and standard and metric wrenches I've had for quite a while. Now I will admit, I've got the regular smooth standard combinations. When I was working on race cars and street rods, things like that, and a lot of our sand rails and stuff all had chrome fasteners or painted fasteners and everything. The last thing you want to do is damage them.
Oh, sure.
So I had the Flink Drive Plus at work, but here I kept the smooth jaws so I wouldn't damage the surface. Now, since then, I give my son all of my Flink Drive Plus stuff, but about, 4 or 5 years ago, I bought the Snap-on ratcheting, and I did get those in the Flink Drive Plus.
Oh, okay.
So I still have that capability here in an open end. It's just my combinations don't have it for that reason. I've got an old set of Matco SAE, I used to call them hydraulic wrenches. I think they're technically called a 4-angle wrench.
Oh, okay.
But we always just call them hydraulic wrenches because it seems like that's what we was using them on.
Yeah.
So, everything's on hydraulic lines. Probably my oldest set of ratcheting wrenches, and I still actually really like these, is my Matcos. These are the ones they're not reversible, so you have to turn them over.
Oh, gotcha.
Now the downside of that is you need to pay attention to where you're using them because you can ratchet yourself into a position where you can't get the wrench off. I unfortunately learned the hard way on one, so I'm a little more. I pay a little closer attention now, but the SAE and the metric ones those are not probably, those are my oldest ratcheting style wrenches.
Okay.
And still probably one of the ones I grab for the most. I still like them, which even brings me back to my 1/2 inch wrench. The chrome off my 1/2 inch started peeling off about 6, 8 years ago. And I hit Ken up and I'm like, hey, you warranty this for me with the chrome? Yep, no problem. But I wanted him to match it to the old set where it had the old lettering and the engraving out here on the flat.
Oh, okay.
And he's like, no, I can't. All it is the new where it's engraved in here. And I'm like, but it won't match my set. So every time I open this drawer, I don't know why. It's hard to see, but to me, my eyes go right to that because it doesn't match the set.
Oh, that looks like an old set here.
Yeah, this old offset wrench is another one. That's probably We had a series of valves, hydraulic valves, on some of our Crown and Hyster forklifts. You had to reach over or down underneath other lines, and in order to be able to undo certain fasteners without having to undo all the hydraulic lines, these were the hot ticket to be able to get in there and reach around things. So that's probably 35-ish or so.
You bought this new?
Bought this set new, yes.
Wow. So that's a silly question. Like back in the day, 35, 40 years ago, did they have a Snap-on truck just like they have today?
Yep.
Really?
Yep.
Huh.
That's the first, that's actually the first experience I had with Snap-on, because I had a Craftsman set that I started my professional career with. It was what my parents got me for my high school graduation, was a Craftsman top and bottom toolbox with, all my friends were going on senior trips and I just wanted tools.
Yeah.
and my parents were struggling. We didn't come from a lot of money, so I knew what kind of a sacrifice it was for them to give me that high school graduation present. But man, that's what I started my career with, it had the basic Craftsman wrenches and screwdriver set, and I think it was like 3/8 and 1/2 inch socket set, and a basic plier set. But that's what I started my career with, and then I just added to it, and eventually, as you get older, you get a little more sentimental. I sometimes wish I kind of had that same set now. But I traded everything off, sold everything off, and I sold it to newer workers who were coming into the field.
Okay.
I'd sell it to them, and then I'd upgrade to either the Cornwell, Matco, Snap-on, whatever. And right when I started in '88, Proto actually had a truck as well.
Oh, really?
Went around, but he was that dealer was just phasing out. And I have yet to seen, now Proto and Mac and Stanley are all owned by the same company, but I've never seen another Proto. Blackhawk, I believe. Yeah, my stubby ratcheting ones are Blackhawk.
Okay.
I think both. Yeah, and I've had those quite a while, and I haven't had no problems with them. But then again, you kind of got to know your limitations with certain tools. And I have this conversation with coworkers of mine, because there's some guys that they will break their Snap-on ratcheting wrenches routinely.
Oh, really?
And I like buying things with a warranty, excuse me, but I don't necessarily feel like you have to test that warranty out all the time. There's a right and a wrong way to use tools.
Sure.
And I don't really, if I've got a fastener that's just a normal fastener, no problem. But if I've got one that I know is tight, I will break it loose with a standard combination box end wrench first, then I grab I'll go to my, and maybe that's why I don't have a lot of tool failures, I don't know. Torque adapters. I don't use these a ton, but they have their place. Running overhead on some of these larger Class 8 engines, when you're trying to adjust your valve lash, you're setting it, and then you have your torque wrench handy, and you got to hold it. You can't do that with a socket on there, because you're trying to hold the actual adjuster. But if you take a torque adapter and at 90 degrees on your torque wrench, your torque doesn't change, because you're not changing the effective length of your torque wrench.
Gotcha.
So I use those quite a bit for that, and I'll usually try to use them at 90 degrees, so I don't have to do the math in my head, or do the math worse on the calculator. Do the math to be able to compensate for it's an inch longer, or an inch shorter, or whatever.
I never thought about doing that. 90 degrees, huh?
Screwdriver drawer, a little bit of everything. Old set from back in the 80s. This was my first set of Snap-on screwdrivers. It's the old, I don't know what they call that. It's their old square handled one. Coworker of mine had these and was trading them in when Snap-on come out with this plastic handled one back in 88, I want to say.
Okay.
When they come out with this one. I bought his old set and he bought his new one. And then shortly after that, I bought this set. And I kept the others, and I just added to it because I always wanted to keep that one.
That's
and
awesome. Then
also back about that same time frame, I bought this Mac set, and I really liked the Mac screwdrivers.
Yeah.
But they quit making this one as well. But the Instincts I bought, I think this was 2008.
Okay.
I want to say, when they came out with the Instincts, and I bought it, and then I kind of semi-retired these at work and started using these, and I really like them. As you can see a theme, I'm not into all the funky colors. I'm just traditional. I like the red. Oldest set of picks from Snap-on, and this is back from the 80s as well.
That's cool.
And I think I broke one years ago, got warranty, and I haven't broke. I mean, they've been a good set. Vessel, if you work on anything Japanese, Vessel, the JIS fasteners, Suzuki, Honda, Yamaha, anything like that, and you're having a problem fighting fasteners and your Phillips, you think it's a screwdriver, or you think it's the screws, it's your screwdriver. For pulling exhaust springs, specifically on like snowmobiles and motorcycles, when you're trying to pull the exhaust springs, those tools work great. I've got a snap-on straight one and a Matco angle one. I've seen guys use vice grips. The problem with the vice grips is they put little marks in the springs when you grab them and try to stretch them, and then those marks actually become stress cracks and break. And those two strokes, the way those exhaust pipes and everything sit there and rattle and vibrate and everything, if you're having a lot of problem with exhaust springs breaking on those things, it's probably because the process you're using to install the springs. Tools for Zeus fasteners.
Zeus fastener.
Yeah, so like a lot of your race cars and stuff, when they're putting body panels, aluminum body panels on and off. They use those quick little. Sometimes I call it quarter turns. Zeus is a name brand, but they're actually, I think they're technically called a quarter turn fastener. It's where you'd push it in, turn it a quarter turn, and it kind of cam locks onto a retaining spring. We use those extensively when I was building sand rails. You'd hold all your side panels and everything on. ATVs and snowmobiles, certain covers and stuff, you'd put them on, you'd create them with Zeus fasteners. So this is one that I made. I took a small shank snap-on quarter-inch blade and bought another of the Instinct handles and pressed this one out and pressed this one in. The actual stubby size is almost too short. And so like for adjusting valves on some of the small the ATVs that have the motors underneath the fuel tank, even when you pull the fuel tank off to get in there, it's either this is too short to get down in, reach down into the head, and then get a wrench in there, or you use a standard length one. Well, you get up against the frame now. So this is just the perfect length. Man, that works great. Matter of fact, I just used this also on, I think it was just an Acura, a J35 engine on an Acura. Not too long ago, I was using it on that, and I had somebody stop by and they're like, "Where'd you get that?" That's one that I put together. Plier drawer is I'm not gonna lie, it's a bit of a hodgepodge. There's layers. I'm just out of space. Obviously, I like the snap-on pliers. I like the new Comfort Grip handles. The 46 and the 47 CF LNAs, I bought these probably a year ago, and I bought the 47 when it first came out, and I liked it, but I thought, that's a little big. And then when they come out with the 46, it's like, okay, I got to have that one. And I actually do use that quite a bit.
I see those, and the first time I saw them online, they look gimmicky, kind of, but like, man, those are so useful in so many situations.
So you saw the trick where he picks up the penny by the ridge.
Yeah. And I was like, okay, well.
I think that's the standard selling point. But I tell you, I actually really do like them. They work good. I got a couple of the Knipex or Knipex. I have a hard time saying. I know that's the proper way to say it, but I still call it Knipex. It's aviation. So back when I was building, like I say, doing a lot of race cars and stuff, everything was safety wire. Tied heavily. I'm not an aviation mechanic, but that process is used extensively in the aviation industry. So that's my set that I've had for probably 30 plus years.
Oh man.
And then this set is a proto set. And I like this one because it's reversible left or right. So you can pull it. So if you're trying to turn the wire clockwise to get the rotation or counterclockwise, it's just a simple flip of the switch. I really like this, but I've only had this pair probably 6 or 8 years now. Now for connectors, this tool, I can't remember, Kyoto. So where you have the electrical connectors that have the little push tab, and then you have to push down and pull. Sometimes you can't get enough leverage, especially big hands, you can't get enough leverage on the little clips in there and try to pull. So that's what these are made for. These are made in Japan. And they have a different test, and they work really good. However, Lyle just came out with their version. And I like this one even better.
Oh, do you?
Yeah. This one here will still slip once in a while. And when it does slip, I'm always afraid I'm going to nick a wire or something. And so I'm a little reluctant to try to use those sometimes. But I've just bought these Lio ones probably within the last year, and they have not slipped yet. And they don't have the same quality feel, but they work.
Yeah.
I mean, I can't fault them for that. They work. I don't use vice grips a ton because I don't like the marks they put in fasteners.
Oh, sure.
But I tell you, Snap-on finally got their crap together. It's rather than use, I don't have one of my old ones. All my old ones got moved to welding pliers now.
Okay.
but the old style that used to wrap around and sometimes would slip. These ones here are a machine thimble that's pressed in and then fusion welded with the bolt that goes in. And boy, I tell you, those are really good locking pliers. Really good locking pliers. Hose clamp pliers, constant tension hose clamp pliers. You can grab them on the side or you can grab them on the end. And I've been using these for a couple of years now, and I really like them. They got a nice wide jaw to grab, so if you got the constant tension, like mainly radiator coolant hoses, constant tension clamps, those work good. But Snap-on recently came out with their version, and I like their version because I can open up. I've got it's variable in size, and you can use the same thing. You can use them straight on, or you can use them on the edge. My only thing that's different is if you look at the jaw widths. I mean, these are definitely wider than a standard plier, but I wish they would have gone a little wider. Because that's one of the advantages of this one is just how wide it is. Metrology drawer, all my measuring stuff. So I do have one digital caliper, Starrett.
Okay.
And notice it's the third one back. This is the one. That's still my favorite one. I always grab when I'm measuring something. One. Starrett micrometer, all my angle gauges and everything. This is a depth for checking the depth on various connectors when you're trying to check the depth of a bore or something. Deburring tools, snap ring. There's a 12-inch vernier dial caliper. Feeler gauges. I've got quite a variety that I've used over the years. This just recently, like probably within the last 2 years, I bought this Snap-on set. And I really kind of like it. You just pull back and you can change out the blades. My only suggestion would have been to Snap-on is to maybe make the end caps maybe in different contrasting colors or something. Because you can get this in all different colors, but if they would have made the end, so if you're setting up like say an intake and exhaust valves, I'll set like say for the Cummins I just did, it was a 12 thousandths intake and a 22 thousandths exhaust. It would have been nice to have, so what I ended up doing was just took a piece of blue painter's tape and wrapped around one.
So you can just distinguish the,
I mean it's not, you can look at it, but when you're upside down in the engine bay and on one of these large motorhomes working through the closet, space is a constraint. You usually only work with one hand because the other hand is holding you up.
Gotcha.
Now some of the guys over on Garage Journal where I work or I participate in quite a bit, I made that suggestion over there, and what some of the guys did is they actually found co-workers that wanted to buy them, and they switched out colors. Like one guy would have 2 reds and 2 greens, or 2 reds and 2 blues, or black and blue. So they interchanged as they were them and their friends were buying them.
Yeah.
And that's a great option. Worked out great. And then the other thing I like about these ones is they have these are the ones I really like. I use these as a go no go. So they've got like a 4 thousandths out here and a 6 thousandths here.
Oh,
so
really?
I use the 12 and the 22. So the 12 would be 12 and then 13, or 12 and 14. And I like that because I can, when I'm setting up the valves, I can slide it under, and as soon as it goes in and hits the step, I use that as kind of the go no go. Okay, yeah, that's the right tension, but it won't go to the next one.
Right, yeah.
So I really, for things like that, I kind of prefer the stepped blades.
Yeah, that's genius. Especially when you're not sure if it's just tension that you're hitting or if you're...
Now, old days, Caterpillar used to have where you would use like the inch-pound screwdriver that I showed earlier. You'd set it like 3 inch-pounds of tension. I have not seen that spec. Maybe I'm dating maybe I'm volunteering my age here, but I have not seen that spec lately. But back in the 80s, 70s, 80s, the factory service manuals, a lot of them had, you set it at 3 inch-pounds and then lock your jam nut down. And so that way you made sure it had, and to be honest with you, when you're setting valves, I don't know, I don't want to get into too big of a debate there, but when you're setting up valves, a 1,000th isn't going to make that big of a difference. When you got a range, I think it's all, I always tell people when you're setting them up, have one person set them up and go for the same feel under each one, and then lock it down. If you've got a couple of different guys, one guy might like a loose fit, and the other guy might like a little bit tighter fit. So if you got two guys, one doing, you know, this series or this rotation, the other guy doing the other rotation, I'm not a big fan of that.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, so did I mention I'm old school? I still like air. So most of my tools are all still air, and I still use air every day in my shop.
Yeah.
It's just, you buy once, cry once, and you're done.
Sure.
But I did recently dip my big toe into the battery market.
Did you?
So I bought the 14.4 Snap-on Impact and the extended reach quarter and extended reach 3/8 about 4 or 5 years ago, and I actually I do kind of like them.
Yeah.
Not gonna lie, I do kind of like them. They have their place.
Yeah.
If I'm doing something and I don't have the air hose pulled out or whatever, I'll grab those first. But then usually as a project starts progressing on, the air comes out.
Yeah.
And then I find myself using the air more and more.
Gotcha.
But sometimes it is nice not to drag an air hose over the fender cover or something. This is my latest addition.
Oh, Milwaukee,
I recently finished, I've got a Milwaukee here, I've got a Milwaukee. The drill was the first Milwaukee I bought, and I really liked that in the 18 volt. I really liked that platform, it worked good. Then I bought the Snap-on. If you're after all-out torque and versatility, I hate to say it, the Milwaukee was the way to go. The Snap-on one, I like the size.
Oh, sure.
It's much more compact. This works really good for especially under dash work, things like that.
Yeah.
But I do like that one. But I recently finished off my attached garage on my house, so I was using bit drivers and everything, and I splurged and bought the 12 volt the fuel bit driver.
Oh, nice.
And this actually works really well, and I'm finding I'm reaching for that more and more for little jobs. I just had to do some door straps on a Jeep the other day, and it needed a T30 Torx, and I grabbed that, and it worked.
Oh, did it?
It worked great. I just like,
Yeah, that's awesome.
And then back in the day, this is a newer one. This is a 325, but I had the IM31, and I actually wore one of those out.
Did you?
It seemed like that was always in my hand between doing transmission work, suspension work, stuff like that at home, and at work doing everything on the forklifts from pulling drive motors and everything out to axle work. That I actually wore the IM31. My son has my other one, but I wore one of them out, and when I went to replace it, I upgraded to the new 325. I recently, like 4 or 5 years ago,
look at that.
upgraded to the stubby, and I've been finding myself using it more and more.
Really?
There is quite a quite a length difference. So for things like on these Jeeps, when you're trying to get in to do the axle shafts on the front, and you have to have that 13 millimeter 12 point to get in and get those bolts out, especially with the wobbly. With the standard one you can reach, but with the wobbly, and you put that on there, that's a best combination I've found for zipping those 3 bolts out to hold the unit bearing on.
Okay.
And then I even upgraded to a 1/2-inch stubby. And this is an Onyx and an Astro.
Okay.
But it works really good. I've used this on some suspension work on motorhomes and everything, and it works kind of the same way. It's where places where I normally would have used this extension, I've found since I bought this, I've been using this more and more. The old titanium 2235, I've had that for probably 15, 20 years.
Yeah.
That's just my go-to. That's just rock solid.
Yeah.
It just works. As far as 1/4-inch drive stuff, that old Mac is one of my favorites. I don't even think they make this one anymore. But this is my favorite. I like it because when you're using, I do have the Snap-on 1/4-inch, but it never fails. If you get in there and you bump something, you hit the thing on the back and it'll change the direction on you.
Gotcha, yeah.
For small engines, lawnmowers, stuff like that, I still use it quite a bit. But this, where the forward and reverse is clear back here.
Oh yeah.
You don't bump that.
The sealed head is definitely a plus, but also with it being down low, like if you ever get backed into a corner, like that one, you can't really Like
you back
you
that
can't
one,
switch it, you
exactly.
know.
You back that one into an area.
Yeah, whereas that one's offset. So
yeah, you back that one into an area, you can still have access to it. But I still, this has just got a good feel.
Does it?
I really, and like I say, with the sealed head and everything, that's probably the most reached for 1/4 inch one now. Let's see. There's a certain orientation things have to be in there. Pneumatic saws. So I've got a Matco one here, and I've got this old Snap-on. This one right here is so, for lack of a better words, it's so fluid to use. Huh. It's so easy to use. If I was cutting out aluminum panels for, like, say, a sand rail, and I'm trying to cut around like where a fuel fill would go in or something, it's just so easy to maneuver it around. The new one, a buddy of mine's got the new one. It just, I don't know, it just doesn't, it seems bulky.
Does it?
Physically, it's a little larger, but not bad, but it just feels like it's twice the size.
Oh, really? Huh.
I don't understand it, but the Matco one, the Matco one's nice because it exhausts way back here.
Oh, does it? Okay,
So,
I like the tail.
So it's got the whip on it, and it exhausts way back here. So that is a nice feature.
Interesting.
But I instinctively grabbed from my old Snap-on one. I still like these as well. These are the inline die grinders.
Oh, man.
I generally use this one. Had this one for quite a while. I generally use this one. But there are times where you need to reach in and you can reposition the guard.
Okay.
So I do use the long reach one at times. Majority of the time I reach from the short one, the stubby one. This is a real recent purchase. I've only had this in a couple months and I haven't used it a ton. It's for deburring, so you can set the depth of it. It has inserts that go in here. So if you cut a plate, usually I'll cut them on my bandsaw, and then if it'll leave a sharp 90-degree edge. I'll usually just take like a die grinder with like an 80 grit or something and breathe around the edges to break the corners.
Sure.
And you can get pretty consistent if you're using a nice even movement. But this here it won't let you go any deep. It's got a bearing in the middle. It's kind of like this little router.
Oh, okay.
And so it spins at high RPM, and you hit it, and it just running around, and you can set the depth so you can set how wide of a land you want. And for fabrication work, I've only had that a little short time here, but I really like it. And then other than that, I got a lot of different variety of die grinders, 90 degrees straight, all for fabrication, because over the years I got to the point where if I'm doing something, I might need 4 different attachments, and I hate having to stop in the middle.
Oh, gotcha.
It just seems to impede workflow. This I bought Ingersoll Rand impact driver. I bought this to try on the Triton V8s with the spark plugs. I watched a guy on YouTube, and I didn't really condone using impacts on those spark plugs on those, but the way he did it made sense as far as with the jarring. And so I bought this to try, and it worked on the one I did it on, but it just gave me the heebie-jeebies. But I've used it on other things since, and I like it. Would I buy it again? I don't know.
The one kickback on that is like there's no ratcheting mechanism on it. So like
if you did want impact,
if you
it's
didn't
not like a
use
ratchet.
Right, yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, you're right. That is one of the downfalls. You can't break it loose and then hit the button.
Yeah.
Hammer drawer, wide variety. So I've had this small ball peen for decades, and I liked it, but it got to where I was starting to nick the handle on it, and it started to concern me. So I put some heat shrink over this end years ago.
Okay.
But I recently, to replace it, I bought the anti-vibe.
Yeah.
And I kind of like it. It's works good.
Nice.
So that's the first anti-vibe I've bought, and then I recently bought the 4-pound mini sledge.
Oh, geez, yeah.
And that I've only used it a few times in the year or so I've had it, but I like it. It works good. Drilling, I think they call this a drilling hammer, 32 ounce. I use that quite a bit, and that's got a larger driver on one, smaller on the other. I grab it almost instinctively now, more over than my ball peens. So the brass dead blow, I bought one. That was probably one of my first, next to my Cornwell sockets. That was probably one of my first purchases back in late 80s, 88, 89 area. But it was the old style handle. I don't even think I have one any longer. It was the old style handle, and I was doing a Ford 88 rear end on, I was doing one of my videos on it, and I was doing it, and I hit the pinion trying to knock the pinion out of the yoke, and something hit me, and I thought, what the heck was that? And I'm looking around, couldn't find anything. It blew the end of the handle out. It just like crumbled. And so there again, it was probably 33, 34 years old at the time. And I hit Ken up, and Ken's like, yeah, I'll warranty it. But he couldn't warranty it with the old style, and it had sentimental value.
Oh, yeah.
It had a special feel. But I'm trying to get to like the new one.
Yeah.
This is one that I fabricated. If you're familiar with in the Jeep world, they have RCV is a manufacturer of Jeep axles.
Okay.
Well, they make them for all kinds of things. They make them for the Toyotas, Fords, everything. But to rebuild them, you're going in and pulling the center. They're a 6-ball CV joint rather than like a traditional 3-ball.
Okay.
So you have to cock the spider in there a certain direction, drive the ball out, turn it 180, drive the ball out.
Huh.
And I watched a video of theirs years ago, and they had a hammer that they had built, so I kind of copied it. And I like it because I can take the handle's about the size of the axle shaft.
Okay.
So I can stick the handle in, rotate the cage, and then I took a drift and cut it at the diameter I wanted roughly, and then welded it on. And so then I smack it, drive the ball out, grab it, rock it to the next one, drive the ball out, rock it to the next one, and I can move through the process of rebuilding the shafts quite quickly and easily with one tool. Okay, bottom drawer is kind of the hodgepodge of stuff that doesn't fit in everything else. This is all my big wrenches from up here. I go to 1 1/8, I believe it is. Yeah, 1 1/8, and then here I go up to 2 inch. I've got my large Knipex Cobras, I believe they are. Emergency brake pliers, my large for battery cable plug-ins.
Yeah.
My charge gauge for charging nitrogen shocks when we were doing snowmobiles and ATVs. A lot of them were running nitrogen charged shocks, so that's what I charge.
Oh, okay.
This is what I charge. I got a nitrogen bottle in the other bay over there. This is a Williams, but it's a large chain strap wrench. Don't use that too much because it does damage and mar whatever you're clamping on.
Oh, yeah.
But for hydraulic cylinders and things like that, like I said, I still occasionally work on heavy equipment and farm equipment and stuff for friends and neighbors. So where they're not worried about marring a surface, they just want the piece of equipment fixed.
Yeah.
A couple of hood props. These are quite popular right now. The smaller one's Baco, and the larger one's Snap-on.
Okay.
I don't use them a ton. There again, they have a tendency to mar the surface.
Sure, yeah.
They're like a pipe, consider it like a pipe wrench. Boy, I tell you, once you do lock onto something, they don't let go.
Sure, yeah.
They will damage stuff before they let go. That's pretty much the main toolbox.
Man.
That's there's 35 plus years of collecting and using the basics.
So are these US General?
Yes, they're US General. I just debadged them when I put them in. So I built the workbenches. This one's 10 foot by 12 foot. The frameworks bolt together. Okay. And then the two tops I put in place and welded at the corner. So it's rock solid. It doesn't go anywhere. When I built this also, so in my last shop, I did a lot of transmissions and small engines. I think OTC made an adapter that bolted to your workbench. Okay. And you had different attachments that you could fit in and out of it to hold like the transmissions by the bell housing and flip them around. Okay. I didn't want to spend the money on the OTC one, so I fabricated one and had it bolted, had the receptacle bolted to my last bench, and then I would insert, whether it be for a Turbo 400 tranny, a LL6L or a 4L60E or Torque Flight or C6 or whatever. I had the different attachments I built that would slide in and out. And then I had one that you could bolt like snowmobile engines on that would bolt up through the bottom, so I could rebuild snowmobile engines and flip them and pull the crank out for splitting cases and different things. So I had various attachments, but it never failed. I had the vise at one end of my bench and the fixture at the other end of that bench, and it never failed. One of the two would always get in the way. And I thought, okay, if I had to do it again, I wouldn't put one of these on the bench.
Oh, gotcha.
I want the vise on the bench permanently. And so the other one, I put receiver receptacles here and over by the solvent tank. And then I converted the adapter over to a tube that slides in. I can lock it down, so now I can hold the transmission here. Generally, I use the one over there by the solvent tank. So as I'm tearing a transmission apart, I've got my welding table that I'll bring over right here. It's on wheels. I'll roll over right here. I'll disassemble everything. It goes right onto the inspection table for inspection. Then from there, it goes into the solvent tank for cleaning. Then it goes right here for final inspection and assembly. And so I've got it into a system where I can stand right here, pull the transmission down, and it goes right around, and I can work right here.
That's amazing.
So I've got one of those on each end, so I can do, like I said, transmission or two-stroke engine. I don't do many two-stroke engines anymore, but I still got the attachments.
Gotcha.
But I made them to where they just fit into the bench.
Man, that's so cool. So how do you compare like these US Generals to like your Master Series?
Not even in the same ballpark as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah.
Like I say, that's mainly what I work out of. For the secondary components or tools rather that I use, they're working great.
Really?
They're working
That's
great.
awesome.
For a hobbyist, I would say they'd be perfectly acceptable.
Yeah.
Perfectly
That's so
acceptable.
Cool.
So yeah, as we come around here, I've got a cart that I made years ago, and this has a lot of my machining, just my machining tools and stuff in it for end mills and lathe bits and carbides. I have a tap and die, a metric and an SAE, and then gauge blocks, rotary table, things that are more geared towards machining.
Okay.
Like I mentioned before, I'm a mechanic who kind of taught himself to machine and weld, so I'm not a full-blown machinist, but I like to at least do my attempt to do the best job I can. Pin gauges, these are made for if you're drilling holes and you need to be an exact certain size. You've got right every thousandth.
Oh, okay.
So I've got anywhere from 16th inch all the way up to 3/4 inch.
Oh, okay.
Precision Matthews knee mill. This is similar to like a Bridgeport. I'm sure you've heard of Bridgeport mill. This is basically a full-blown Bridgeport head on a smaller bodied mill. Lathe Precision Matthews also 1340. Both of these pieces of equipment are Taiwanese, so they're cut above the Chinese stuff.
Okay.
Probably not quite as good as like the old 60s, 50s, 60s era, 40s, 50s, 60s era US made stuff.
Okay.
But it was new, so I knew it wasn't all worn out.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Old pan brake. This is a Diacro. I would have loved to have had a 48-inch pan brake, but there again, space being what it is, the 24-inch one works great. 20-inch, this is like the old Dual band saws, but there again, it's a Taiwanese import.
Okay.
12-inch discs, 6x48 belt. I've had this probably 25 years. Probably one of the most used pieces of equipment in my shop. Jet 20-inch floor-mounted drill press. Again, I added about a 6-inch riser because my son and I are both tall, so I wanted to get it up, more comfortable working height. Bench grinder. Again, I built the riser, the base for it to get it up at a more comfortable working height. Miller welders. I'm a Miller fan. Dynasty 300 TIG machine, 251, 300. I've made a lot of money and a lot of parts over the years with those machines, and I love them. This one here is a little 211. I keep 023 wire on this one. Works more for like sheet metal and so forth if I'm spot welding. I've only had this in about 4 or 5 years now. Plasma cutter. Don't use a plasma cutter a lot. It's not exactly my favorite process for cutting metal. I generally will turn to either the bandsaw, the horizontal or vertical bandsaws. Okay. I like to cut a little more precise than that. Mitering head, meaning to change the direction.
Oh, wow.
The head changes rather than some of the other ones, the more popular ones you see. The whole machine has to turn.
Yeah, yeah.
Or the vise turns, and this one actually works really well. It's variable speed. It's all frequency drive.
And just real touch. So he has a 6.2 LS motor in this Jeep.
Yeah,
that's
so
crazy.
2011 Jeep, and then we put a 6.2 and L94 with a 6L80 automatic transmission out of a 2012 Denali.
Gosh,
so it's all GM. It's all GM powertrained, and then a Dynatrac front axle, Dana 44, the Pro Rock 44 front axle.
And these other projects you got going on?
So yeah, I've got a radial flyer wagon that I built for my grandson. I built it to look like a 32 Roadster, where the front frame rails are narrowed and pinched, and then the King Bee headlight style. And I made the handle to where it's removable.
That's
so my
cool.
son can haul it in the back of his truck without worrying about smacking his side of his truck with the handle. And it's got a rubber cushion.
So you made all of this.
So all this was fabricated and built in-house here. The frame rails all out of sheet metal and welded together and metal finished. The axles, tubes are welded. Machined all the knuckles and everything, so it's got the proper Ackerman angle and the proper camber built in. Pinion inclination angle built in. And then I just used little rod ends for all the steering. And we picked him up a little 67 Camaro pedal car that's in pretty rough condition. It's gonna get full paint and body, and all the issues are going to be corrected, and we're going to paint that to match mine and the wife's C5 or not C5, fifth gen Camaro.
Okay.
It's a crystal red tint coat, so all this will be painted and everything to match our 5th gen.
Goodness, even this is cool though. Just the patina on it is. Just...
Yeah, I kind of waffled on just letting him have at it because I know it's going to get dinged and scratched, but I can't do that. I got to custom build everything. I can't leave anything alone.
Well, Mike, thank you so much. You have like everything at your disposal. I mean, there's stuff that we haven't even looked at, like still.
Yeah, it's been a lifelong pursuit. I mean, anybody who's starts at this at a young age, I was fortunate where I started wrenching it right out of high school.
Yeah.
And I knew this is what I wanted to do with my life. And I'm still just as passionate about it now as I was 37 years ago when I graduated high school.
Goodness, that's amazing. Well, Mike, thank you so much for taking the time out of your day and showing me your whole setup. This is so amazing.
Appreciate it.
I really do appreciate it.
Thank you.
That is so cool. Hope you guys enjoyed it. This is crazy. But if you have a toolbox you'd like to have featured on the channel, just hit me up. But till the next one, we'll see you. Yeah, I've seen a lot of guys, they have like the Epic. Well, they have the Master, and then they upgrade to the Epic, and they're like, I miss my Master. So
really?
Yeah, I've heard a lot of people say that.
Because I kind of waffled on the Epic, but for some reason, I didn't like the drawer pulls. And there's people that don't like the slide drawer pulls on the Master Series. So it's kind of, well, I guess that's why they make two different.
Right.
How boring would it be if we all like the same things, right?